Spies has contained 19 different playable maps in its history, each with different cities, bonus cities, and connections between them. But the most unique map in all facets of the game has gotta be St. Peter's Cross. St. Peter's Cross has 4 central connected bonus cities, 8 perimeter cities that connect to the center, and 2 more that connect to the outside. It was introduced during Season 1 of Two Spies, and is still in the competitive map rotation. Previously, Two Spies only had 9 maps, but Season 1 retired a few maps and introduced 4 more. All roads lead to Berlin, Viennese, Bridges, and St. Peter's Cross, maps with really unique designs. There are 3 different qualities that make St. Peter's Cross special, and the first is the bonus cities. Bonus cities are extra valuable cities on maps in bold text that generate more intel, which allows you to buy more actions, which allows you to find and strike your opponent to win the round. Before Season 1, no map had more than 3 bonus cities, and only Bridges, introduced alongside St. Peter's Cross, has 4. 4 bonus cities on a map is kinda crazy, because it leads to a lot more intel available to be controlled. Controlling a bonus city gives you 4 extra intel per turn, compared to just 1 for non-bonus cities. And on most maps, you only control 1, maybe 2 bonus cities if you're really in control. 4 bonus cities allows both you and your opponent to control 2 bonus cities and gain a ton of intel to battle, or it allows one player to control 3 or 4 bonus cities and earn an insane amount of intel per turn to suffocate their enemy who has a quarter of their opponent's intel per turn. However, it's not just the number of bonus cities that makes St. Peter's Cross special, it's also their connections. These roads from Berlin to Vienna and Geneva to Warsaw are the only roads in the entire game that overlap. This means that if you're in a bonus city, you can move to every other bonus city, which is insane. Bridges also has 4 bonus cities, but neither Geneva and Vienna nor Berlin and Venice connect, and this balances the map. It makes it next to impossible to control 3 bonus cities, as you're either too far away to move and strike one city, or you're vulnerable to your opponent going deep into 2 different bonus cities. This leads to many games on Bridges where both players control 2 bonus cities, but can't approach the enemy's territory as it's predictable and easy to be struck. This doesn't happen on St. Peter's Cross, because all bonus cities connect, allowing you to strike anywhere you want, and allowing you to control all 4 of them with no good way for your opponent to battle back. But the last unique quality about St. Peter's Cross is not apparent in this picture: the city shutdowns. During a round of Two Spies, cities will shut down, not allowing you to travel to them. As more cities shut down, the map becomes smaller, forcing you to get closer to your opponent, make riskier plays, and crucially, make sure the round doesn't last forever. Every round shuts down slightly different, but it usually follows a pattern of shutting down toward the center of the map near the bonus cities. On Bridges, it shuts down to the middle bonus cities. On Bifocal, it shuts down to the middle bonus cities. And on Roundabout, you guessed it, it shuts down to the middle bonus cities. You'd think that of all the maps, surely St. Peter's Cross with 4 big bouncing bonus cities shuts down to the center. But usually, it doesn't. Instead, it shuts down to these 4 hidden southern cities, which changes the entire complexity of the endgame, as both players will need to abandon their bonus cities to head south. But to understand the endgame, first we need to talk about the early game. St. Peter's Cross has 10 different spawns where both players begin the round, but they all follow the same general formula. Player 1, who goes first, will be put 1 city away from the bonus cities to the north of player 2. They usually start in Brussels, Amsterdam, Stockholm, Kiev, and sometimes Paris or Monaco. Player 2 moves second and is also 1 city away from the center to the south of player 1, and this is usually Monaco or Belgrade, 2 cities that crucially connect at the bottom, though it can also be Brussels or Kiev as well. Alright, enough talk, let's actually play a game of Two Spies. You are going first on St. Peter's Cross. Where do you go? And obviously, you choose one of the central bonus cities. Brilliant move. Now let's say you're going second on St. Peter's Cross. Where do you go? Oh yeah, it's a lot tougher of a choice because your opponent can be in all 4 bonus cities, and if you land in the same city as them, they strike and you lose the round. This map absolutely sucks if you're the second player. If you decide to move to a bonus city, there is a 1 in 4 chance you're struck. If you survive and then your opponent decides to strike, there is a 1 in 3 chance they find you and win the round, and this can turn into a 1 in 2 chance if intel spawns. Intel spawns randomly during turns and can't spawn in the same city as a player. And if it spawns in, say, a bonus city, Now it's even easier for your opponent to strike you. And even if you survive the strike, congratulations, you have a 1 in 3 chance to strike your opponent. So you have a 50% chance to survive, and your reward, having no idea where they are, or just controlling and being suck. This sucks. Well, let's say you get lucky and intel spawns for your turn. Well, that's convenient. Your opponent isn't there and you'll be safe. That is the most obvious move you can make, and your opponent will likely be striking instantly. Okay, let's rewind then. What if instead we decide to move to the close bonus city and strike? Well, they probably are expecting a strike, so I wouldn't expect them to be close, though there's always a chance it hits, and fake striking is also an option too. You pretend to strike turn 1, and then you actually strike during turn 2, and either of these options could work. Player 1 may try to move and strike you during one of their turns, and someone would get struck and end the round, but if you're the opponent in this situation, I don't think striking is the right option. Why would I strike, which is around a 50-50 chance of winning, when I can just control and move to another safe bonus city that has a low chance of being struck? 2 Spies is a game of territory, and right now player 1 can control 2 bonus cities, while player 2 might be able to control 1. This sucks. During seasons 1 and 2, we didn't have a good strategy to move second. We'd usually move and hope for the best, sometimes strike or fake strike and hope it works out, or possibly wait twice in our spawn city and move the next turn. This puts you at a disadvantage, but at least you're still alive for the rest of the round. However, by season 3 of 2 Spies, myself, Smooth Charlie, and Course Halo, among others, had innovated a new strategy to stay safe when moving second. I'm going to call it the perimeter opening. Rather than moving to the center and hoping you survive, you start by moving around the perimeter of the map. Your opponent either controls or strikes, and the next turn you strike the closest bonus city. There's a chance that you win the round, but the real benefit is that you're able to move to many different bonus cities with little risk of dying. Next turn you can control, buy strike reports later, and get into the mid-game of 2 Spies, which is much more even. The perimeter strategy has revolutionized the rounds of St. Peter's Cross from a random strike fest to an even strategical battle. Move around the perimeter to start the round, then strike to enter the cross safely. Mixing in some fake strikes around the perimeter also keeps your opponent guessing and allows you to counter their strikes if they see you coming. The perimeter strategy does depend a little on your spawn, as some spawn cities allow you to threaten more bonus cities. For example, if you start in Monaco, you can only threaten Geneva and Vienna, as cities that connect Berlin or Warsaw are too far away to move to. But if you spawn in Belgrade, you're able to threaten Geneva, Vienna, and Warsaw, which makes it more random for your opponent to strike in the future and makes it safer when you strike. You're able to get around this spawn restriction in Monaco by moving to Belgrade or Brussels first, then striking into Amsterdam or Kiev if you're able, then striking into the cross. Throw in some fake strikes on top of this, your opponent will have absolutely no idea where you are and may just control to stay safe. Starting in Belgrade or Kiev allows you to have another fun little opening as well. Starting in Belgrade turn 1, you can move and strike Kiev, which makes it look like you struck Vienna. The next turn you can strike Warsaw, which is an unexpected place for you to be. Fake striking makes this strategy even deadlier, as this strategy can be somewhat predictable at the high ranks. This perimeter strike makes an initial strike or fake strike even stronger, because there are now 3 places your opponent has to consider rather than 2. This incentivizes them to control and play slow rather than strike because there are more places that you could be. And with the perimeter strategy being so popular, player 1 has been trying to adapt to counter it. This usually means that they are controlling faster around the perimeter to shut out player 2, and this has led to the turn 1 strike to become an even more viable strategy. If your opponent is planning to control immediately anyway, then moving and striking a bonus city allows you to get a head start on intel. It is always so risky for player 1 to go for a strike when player 2 could have fake struck, and this puts you at around a neutral position and lets player 2 battle back over the full round. Recently, top players have found another little wrinkle to the beginning of the game as well. With the perimeter strategy being so popular and striking making a comeback, player 1 has been avoiding the city close to player 2. It's always so risky for player 1 to move right next to player 2 because you could lose in one turn on the map you have a huge advantage on, especially with striking being a prevalent opening. But if player 1 isn't moving to the city closest to you, well, that makes it safe for player 2 to just move and wait. It will lead to some occasional early losses, and it is riskier than the perimeter strategy, but it enables an unexpected strike or a quick start to developing territory next turn. All of these openings have counters to them that your opponent will be trying to find, and that's why the openings are constantly being thought over and switched up. If you are a player going second on St. Peter's Cross, try to use a blend of all these strategies to keep your opponent guessing. Every strategy in Two Spies will fail sometimes, but varying up your openings allows you to remain unpredictable, which is terrifying for your opponent. These situations have all been under the assumption that your opponent moves twice to start the match. You may be wondering, Mr. Android, what happens if the opponent moves and controls their close bonus city? Pretty much nothing, and I would actually argue that it puts you at an advantage. If you move twice, look at their screen. You could be in any of the bonus cities, or you could be using the perimeter strategy. They can't move anywhere because you could be anywhere, and they are forced to strike or fake strike, which has low odds of winning and higher odds of losing. Yes, they control a bonus city, but they'll control one sooner or later anyway, and controlling initially makes it safe for player 2 to try any strategy they want to control bonus cities and start moving toward the mid-game. I think moving and controlling as player 1 leaves you worse off than just moving twice and controlling the next turn, simply because there's always a chance that your opponent will stumble into the city you're waiting in. There's also the possibility that player 1 buys strike reports during their first turn. If you lost the previous round, you start with 10 intel, which is the perfect amount to buy strike reports and move. This ruins the perimeter strategy, as you're not able to strike into the bonus cities to be safe, but it isn't as great as it looks. Yes, this can be super scary if you are the second player. However, looking at it from player 1's point of view, they still don't know where you are. If they strike, it's just a 1 in 3 chance they win, and while it sucks that you can't punish them when they take a silly strike, controlling first gives you an advantage on a map where you are at a disadvantage. Play slow, do not strike because you have no idea where they are, and don't be super disheartened if they get lucky and win early. The odds are against it. Congratulations, we have survived the first couple turns of St. Peter's Cross. Now what? In the mid-game, your biggest goal should be to control a second bonus city. That 4 extra intel is very important, as is having a second city in the cross to move to. Buy strike reports early and use that to stay safe in the uncontrolled city. Your opponent is trying to do the same thing, so a stalemate usually forms where you each get a bonus city. When your opponent controls a city, they won't move to a city that you could potentially be, so this is your opportunity to move to the city then control next turn. And if this feels too risky, you can always locate them, and if they're not in a controlled city, move there, then control next turn. Strike reports are so good at deterring your opponent from striking because there's no worse feeling in Two Spies than going for a big strike and getting your cover blown when you miss to lose the round. Don't just try to go deep into one of their controlled cities because that is where they are and they will strike you. And even if you avoid their strike, they still control one bonus city and have the rest of the round to battle back, so going deep is not worth the risk of losing the round. And now we are at a true stalemate. You and your opponent both have 2 bonus cities controlled. What do we do now? Well, the obvious answer is to buy encryption. Encryption is super powerful, as it only costs 25 intel, and it hides which action you're buying from your opponent. Encryption is the backbone of Two Spies, and you are earning 11 intel per turn, so you should totally buy it, as should your opponent. But now what? You'll be tempted to go deep into your opponent's bonus city to control, but don't do that. It is so dangerous to go deep. Obviously, if you go deep into the wrong city, you're struck and the round is over. But what's the plan when they buy an action and move? You can't control because they can be in every single city that would be safe, so now you are in a super awkward position. Always try to avoid ending your turn in the same city as your opponent because it usually leads to disaster. One of my common plays on this map is to locate and wait. Then my opponent tries to go deep into my city to counterattack, but I just strike and win. It's that easy. If you really want to go deep into their city, at least locate beforehand. This makes it look like you may have gone deep, putting them on the defensive where they may strike or go deep somewhere, and this makes it less likely that you will get struck. If your opponent strikes, it allows you to go deep into their other bonus city, as they wouldn't move there after you bought an action and moved, because you could have just gone deep there. This isn't the perfect move though, as they could just wait and go deep into one of your cities next turn, and now you're in a tough spot where you may need to go deep again to stay safe. Going deep into their controlled city is very risky on any map, and St. Peter's Cross makes it especially hard to control without getting struck. Don't go deep into their bonus cities without a plan. Preparing an action isn't the answer either. Prepping actually puts you in a similar situation as deep cover, except it costs 20 more intel. Prepping gives you 3 actions during your next turn at the cost of 40 intel, and congratulations, you have 3 actions. But where's your opponent? After you bought an action, they probably went deep to attack your cities or defend theirs, so locating probably won't do any good. You can go deep and strike, but that's 60 intel spent for a 1 in 4 chance of striking your opponent. Theoretically, you could strike where you are in another city, which is a 50-50 chance of winning, but the odds that you and your opponent are in the same cities are low, which makes it more of a 1 in 3 chance. You don't want to go for 50-50s in the first place if you want to win consistently, so don't go for plays that are lower odds unless you have a good reason to. Prepping doesn't provide a good way to win in this situation, so it's really not worth the 40 intel of buying it. You may think that this is setting up the answer of Rapid Recon, but I wouldn't really recommend it either. Rapid Recon is very powerful as it allows you to catch your opponent by moving to the same city as them. However, when you're both earning 11 or 12 intel per turn, it's simply not as powerful because both players are able to go deep a lot more often, which makes Rapid Recon dangerous to use and overall ineffective. If your opponent buys an action, moving to find them is unlikely because they probably went deep, and now you're dead if they went deep into your city or they prepped in the other bonus city. So we've already bought encryption and strike reports, and we shouldn't go deep by Rapid Recon or prep, and locating doesn't do anything by itself, so the answer is to just do nothing? Well, I would say kind of for the time being. The whole point of this section is telling you that winning in the mid-game on St. Peter's Cross is very difficult. It's hard to find your opponent to win the round, but it's very easy to get caught and lose. Locate, go deep, defend your territory, and see if the opponent does something stupid that allows you to win, but otherwise, just stay patient and try to win in the endgame. The endgame of St. Peter's Cross is my favorite in the whole game due to how the city shut down on this map. Around 3/4 of the time, the map will shut down starting up north, moving south, leading to a final 4 of Monaco, Venice, Rome, and Belgrade. And the other quarter of the time, it just shuts down to the 4 bonus cities. You can actually tell which of these endgames you're getting pretty early on in the round. If Venice or Rome are one of the first 3 cities shutting down, the bonus cities will be the final 4 cities remaining. But if Venice and Rome don't shut down, then the map will shut down to the southern cities. For the bonus city endgame, it's pretty straightforward. The cities will close around you and you need to find a way to strike your opponent. There's no point in being defensive just to be defensive now. You've got to find a way to strike. Go deep, prep, buy Rapid Recon, do whatever it takes for you to strike your opponent before they strike you. There's no big tip or strategy that will help for this endgame, it is just normal to Spies. The southern endgame is a lot more interesting. These shutdown cities lead to a big dilemma. Do you move south early to control the 4 cities, which gives you a huge advantage late, but also allows your opponent to control all of the bonus cities, giving them tons of intel per turn and draining yours? Or do you decide to wait for your opponent to move south, then control their bonus cities and gain a bunch of intel, but somehow need to penetrate your opponent's territory and strike them? I have been in this 6-city map hundreds of times, both as the northern player who has Rapid Recon and a bunch of intel, but has to move toward the opponent, and as the southern player who has territory but very little intel to hide. It is the ultimate territory versus intel endgame, and there's not really a right answer when choosing your side. This is also why the spawns are so important. Player 2 is at a big disadvantage all game until the endgame, where controlling Monaco or Belgrade initially suddenly becomes incredibly valuable. If you're ever outnumbered with bonus cities and it's difficult to control one of your opponents, start moving south and controlling the cities. It's far easier to win the final endgame battle as the south side than to try to fight up against their territory when they have more intel than you. They're likely going to control your final bonus city by prepping, using Rapid Recon, or going deep anyway, so don't get too brokenhearted about abandoning it. It's for the greater good. Just head south and control all 4 cities. It's very important both for intel and territory. If you and your opponent control bonus cities that are lateral to each other, the northern side needs to try to push downward before these shutdown cities put them in a bad position. Buying Rapid Recon can really help to put pressure on your opponent and makes it easier to go deep into their cities, though prepping can be very helpful as well. It's easier to attack Geneva, as there are a few more bordering cities that can keep you safe after you control, while Vienna only has 1. The southern side has better positioning and should try to defend their bonus cities for as long as they can, but should start moving southward if the north side controls one of their bonus cities or puts a lot of pressure on them. You can try to counter by going deep towards the north, but it puts you in a really bad position, so always have an escape plan ready. If you and your opponent control 2 cities that are stacked, you're pretty much even, so there's no overarching advice to give. You should try to fight over territory, but you're always able to move southward in case things start to go wrong. One player has to move south eventually, so it's your choice whether you go first or you wait for your opponent. If you like intel and think it's easier to breach and attack, then stay at the bonus cities. If you like territory and think it's easier to defend your cities, then start moving southward and controlling. I slightly prefer the southern side, but I am a wimp about defending my cities and it's easier to just escape down south. Choose whichever one you prefer. And finally, I'll discuss the final 6 situation itself. If you are the southern player, grab as many intel spawns as you can and don't just locate or go deep for no reason. You have very little intel per turn, so it's important to save it for when you really need it, like defending from a prep or rapid recon, or pressuring your opponent from controlling. The northern person will usually have intel to spare, so constantly buy actions to try to force your opponent to defend and waste intel. It's easier to move forward if your opponent has less intel and is constantly worried that you're hunting them by prepping, going deep, and using rapid recon. As the northern player, it's super risky to try to control the southern cities. If your opponent goes deep into one you didn't expect, you're dead with a ton of intel. So if you're the northern spy, I would recommend prepping up north, then going deep into any of the southern cities. Go deep into intel cities to make sure your opponent doesn't snatch the intel and try to force them into a low percentage strike when they run out of intel. If you are the southern spy, I'd recommend defending Monaco and Belgrade to make it difficult for your opponent to move southward. Go deep into intel cities to make sure your intel doesn't run out, and strike more often because a strike costs no intel, has a chance to win, and there are still other cities to retreat to if you miss. The final bit of advice regards cities that are shutting down. Your opponent isn't able to strike in a shutdown city, so it's useful for both players to stay safe for one turn, but this can backfire as you need to leave the very next turn, which allows your opponent to get in a good position to strike. Never go to a city that's shutting down, which only connects to one city, because next turn there's only one place you can move and your opponent will strike. However, if a shutdown city borders 2 cities, it can be a good idea to stay safe for one turn and earn a little more intel. This is usually more relevant for the southern player if they run low on intel and need to stockpile for next turn, but it's still risky. Your opponent knows where you are and know where you have to go, so they're going to be ready to pounce. This matters most when there's only 3 cities remaining and one is shutting down, because the match will end in a 50-50 regardless. This lets you go for a safe strike and then choose the 50-50 next turn, which both are super advantageous. This is endgame advice for all maps because proper shutdown strategy will win you many games of 2 Spies. And that is the map breakdown for St. Peter's Cross. A map with a ridiculous early game that makes it super hard for the second player, that gives both players way too much intel, that makes the mid-game kind of impossible to win, that has the coolest map shutdown in the game, and leads to one of the most interesting endgames in 2 Spies that sucks for both spies. I absolutely hated this map when it came out 3.5 years ago, but the advancement in strategy has made this one of my favorites to play on, even though it's the map I've lost the most on. If you enjoyed this video, I have many more 2 Spies videos uploaded on the channel. If you're a new player, there's the 2 Spies tutorial that explains a lot more strategies and information about the game. Otherwise, there's a ton of match replays, shorts of sped up rounds, round endings, and a few explanations, and a handful of commentated games where I explain the strategies and decisions made each turn in a game of Two Spies. Matches or shorts are uploaded daily, and commentated videos come out every once in a while, so subscribe if you want to see more in the future. And download Two Spies on Apple devices and join the Two Spies Discord, where there are many more players who would be happy to discuss the game or play a match. Thank you so much for watching.